Adding a stealth mechanic to the Division 3 could be an innovative way to diversify gameplay and appeal to a broader audience. While stealth has not been a core aspect of the franchise so far, implementing it effectively would require thoughtful integration into the game's RPG system and combat mechanics. And there are reasons why this, when looking at it from an outside perspective, maybe could not work. I mean, in an RPG game, there are roles. You have DPS, tank, healers, and you have certain classes that deal specific damages. For example, enemies could have like 10 million health. So you're going to have to put a build together and calculate the damage you need in order to take that health down. So including stealth in a game like this would require a certain type of integration, because if you sneak up on an enemy and just shoot them or melee them or whatever, it's going to deal almost zero damage to that enemy's health. So how can this be integrated into the system of an RPG looter shooter like the Division franchise? I didn't play Ghost Recon Wildlands at all, but I knew about the game. That game had a heavy stealth element. You can take out entire hideouts by just stealth killing enemies, and it was really cool. But like I said, it wasn't like the Division. It's not a looter shooter. Enemies don't have tons of health to where you have to dump 1,000 bullets in them. It was a completely different play style. What I'm saying is that it's been made by the same company, so it can be implemented somehow. Like you have crouching in Ghost Recon Wildlands. Similarly, in the Division Heartland, which is such a bummer that it wasn't released, but I played that game extensively. They also had a crouch mechanic. They had a slide mechanic, but the Division Heartland was a lot like the Division 2 and the Division 1 with the health and the RPG looter element. So there was a small element of stealth that was involved with Heartland, but just like Division 2, when you aggro one enemy, all of the enemies in the area are alerted. So how could they have implemented stealth in the Division Heartland? Well, maybe it was more so for PvP. Anyways, I just wanted to show the similarities between the games, being that they're made by the same company, and that there can be a way this can be implemented. It just takes some work under the hood by the developers to make it happen. I mean, in the Division in general, there's stealth overall, autonomous stealth, meaning that you can simply run behind enemies and they won't see you, they won't hear you. Or you have pulse resistance in PvP, wherein you have the element of surprise when flanking around the map. So there are elements of stealth in the game, but they're not really set in stone or notified as such. So a stealth focused tree could unlock perks and abilities that enhance the player's capacity to evade detection or execute silent takedowns. Key upgrades might include a camouflage tech, which temporarily reduces visibility or disguises a player when crouched or stationary. I've seen this in many games, like for example Fallout. They had this leg armor. It was like a chameleon leg armor that you got off the Deathclaw, where when you were still and crouching, you just became like camouflage and nobody could really see you. If you added stealth attributes onto the skill tree, it would get even worse. It was actually even broken because you had different stats that came with stealth in general, which would multiply your damage 5 to 10 times. And this became broken in Starfield to the point where it was just like laughable. And then the game was easy even on very hard. So that's one of the reasons I stopped playing the game, because of the lack of difficulty. And we wouldn't want this to happen in the Division 2. There are different specializations and specialization weapons and different perks on these tiers that allow you to do certain things. I think that a stealth specialization would be a great addition to the game, because not only would it include more variety in the game, it would just add an entire new element to the game itself. I remember seeing a trailer a long time ago where when they were talking about the Division 1 before it came out, they showed some stealth gameplay as if that was going to be in the game, and I'm like, hey, that looks pretty dope, but it doesn't really fit in there. You know what I mean? Just like when I was talking about the health, it has to be a significant damage boost that it gives you in order to incentivize the developers to put something like this in the game. I mean, how can you justify killing a player that invested so much into their builds when it came to like damage resistance and armor to get taken down by a stealth kill? That just doesn't make sense. So it has to be viable. It has to make sense to the actual RPG system that the Division is. I think in PvP it shouldn't really be that relevant, because you know, in PvP you're playing against other players, and in that there's autonomous stealth, like I said before. For example, pulse resistance is completely ineffective in PvE, wherein it's like one of the most important aspects of PvP. Not being able to be detected by the other player is insane. So if you flank somebody, you could potentially take out the entire other team that round with the element of surprise. I think that adding on like a damage multiplier in that respect would just be ridiculous. But for PvE, it would completely make sense, right? So in terms of the skill tree or specialization, I think that sound suppression would be a great thing. Makes movement quieter, allowing players to sneak past enemies undetected. I mean, I know that you see in the game where you can barely hear the footsteps of your character while running, unless you're in snow or gravel or some other type of terrain. You could slightly hear it. Maybe if they increase the sound of the footsteps just while playing the game, and then let's say they have some exotic knee pads, or on the skill tree a perk that makes your footsteps quieter or completely undetectable. This will be on the stealth specialization skill tree, by the way, so it will be exclusive to that. And here's the thing, you can add gear and weapons. We'll get into that, okay? Another aspect of the sound suppression would be great if we could utilize the actual suppressor attachments on the weapon. We know that like on the Mantis exotic, there's an integrated silencer. There are integrated silencers on a lot of the weapons in Division 2. The Savage Wolverine, and just the silencers and suppressors in general in the game that you can attach to your high-end weapons. They have no type of threat reduction at all. I mean, I can't tell. When the enemy gets aggroed, all of them do. So I suggest that maybe make it so that it's mandatory when you put a suppressor on, the enemy cannot hear when you kill their teammate. There are a few maps, for example, in the Division 2 where when you go down and you look at snipers atop covers and then other enemies roaming around below, that would be so cool if you could silently take out those snipers without aggroing everyone else. When you shoot one enemy in Division 2, everyone gets aggroed and they know exactly where you're at. We already have decoys, but once again, once you throw that decoy, the enemy is going to know where you're at. You can add stealth gadgets and gear, drones and decoys, but what about non-lethal options? And this is one of the reasons that stealth would be good for this game, because it wouldn't really throw off the balance in a way. If you use certain gear that has like a stealth talent, for example, chest piece that only has a stealth talent, well, you're gonna be stuck with that while you're playing in the dark zone or conflict or whatever the case. So somebody who'd have a DPS chest piece talent, for example, would outshine you when you're exposed. So you're gonna have to really commit to a stealth based gameplay or aspect in order to really lean into it. Therein is where the balance lies, right? But one other thing that would be great is to add like a field of view for the NPCs where they literally can't see you if you're not in their field of view. I mean, I don't know, they have some like sixth sense where they will see you, they will hear you, and they will all know exactly where you're at. And I think that's kind of unfair. But the important thing is to balance this out with the game that Division is in general. Don't change anything too much to the point where it changes the game. We know what the Division 2 is. It's an RPG looter shooter, and it's always been. People were confused about this when they first started researching the game before it came out. And this is what caused a huge split in the gaming community, and it carved out a whole new genre of games, the RPG looter shooter, and here we are. This group that's been a diehard fan base since the beginning. And others thought it was going to be more like Ghost Recon, or the time to kill would be less, but like I said, it's an RPG, and they have certain health values that need to be defeated with other damage values, which I think a lot of people appreciate. I think it would be cool to have stealth zones or objectives in the dark zone, specific missions or areas that could emphasize stealth gameplay. Like dark zones with infiltration focus, players might need to retrieve a high value loot or intel while avoiding combat, and you get a specific reward just for doing it that way. You know how crazy this would be in something like survival? I know everybody wants that, and I'm sure they're going to bring it back in Division 3. If they don't, they're crazy, okay? So literally crazy. So I mean, just think about it. When you go into survival mode, dropped in there with nothing but a pistol and your wits. So if you go in there and you find certain gear, you be like, oh, I just got this LMG, or I just got this chest piece, I'm good, or I just got this skill, I'm good, right? Imagine going in there and getting stuff for stealth. You'll be the lucky guy in there, and you'll be able to really navigate survival in a way that not many other players can. So stealth, I think overall would be a great addition to the game in general. It would add so much more variety to it. But like I said, you'd have to balance stealth with the Division's core combat. It should complement the game's existing mechanics rather than replace them. For like, you know, hybrid playstyles, players could seamlessly switch between stealth and open combat if detected, making encounters more dynamic. And this is why it makes sense. You know, the game's setting, a collapsed society rife in factions, lends itself to scenarios where stealth could be a key tactical approach. Factions like rogue agents or well-armed militaristic groups could have fortified bases, which they do, making stealth an essential tool for infiltration or sabotage. So this also introduces more varied and strategic gameplay beyond straightforward firefights. But I'm going to end this video in a second. I just have to talk a little bit about how the damage would affect certain enemies when it comes to sneak attacking them. Without a significant payoff for remaining stealthy, the mechanic would feel underwhelming significantly. And here's how it can be addressed. And I'm going to talk about more of this stuff, like why PvP doesn't work in the Division 2 as opposed to why it worked before. There's a lot of things that need to be discussed in order for the developers to really fine-tune what needs to come in the next installment of this game. And I really think that they're lacking in certain aspects that a lot of the player community could help them with. But multiplicative damage bonuses for stealth attacks and stealth mechanics would need a significant damage multiplier for surprise attacks. It could vary depending on the enemy type, and like I said, this wouldn't be something that would be against regular players, because the element of surprise in PvP is enough to really sell that narrative of stealth along with pulse resistance and everything else. But for unarmed enemies, one-hit takedowns for most standard NPCs rewarding stealth precision, like, you know, the red bars and the ones with not really any armor, one hits, I think that's reasonable enough, right? And then armored enemies apply a percentage-based damage boost 3 times or even 5 times that scales with the player's weapon damage or their skill tiers or whatever talent they have on their gear. The attack could also cause a temporary armor break effect. And for bosses, I think this should be different. Deal a flat chunk of damage, 20 to 30% of their total health, to avoid making them too easy to defeat, but still rewarding stealth in some way. Like I said, it has to make sense, you know what I mean? And you know what will also be really cool, like stealth could introduce not only a new specialization, but also, oh, can you imagine what specialization weapon would be for a stealth specialization? I mean, I think you should comment down below and tell me what you think a cool weapon would be for that, like a dart or like a tranquilizer. That would be insane. Not only that, it would introduce a new status effect into the game. Stealth-based attacks could inflict unique debuffs to weaken them for follow-up engagement, like a cripple effect reduces the enemy's movement speed or damage output for a short time. Oh man, yeah, that would be amazing. And finally, you know, for all of this stuff, there should be rewards for the tactical use of stealth. Anyways, I've been talking enough about this, so let me just kind of wrap it up. This system ensures that stealth is rewarding. Let me just tell you why it would work in a game like the Division franchise, because the system ensures stealth is rewarding and a viable alternative to direct combat, especially against high health and armored enemies. By tying stealth effectiveness to damage multipliers as well, armor breaking effects and specific skills, players can engage in tactical gameplay that feels both impactful and rewarding. I'm a big advocate of developers introducing mechanics in games that don't really get old quick or have a lot of replay value. This keeps people coming back and playing your game without you having to even include any significant updates into the game. Not to say you shouldn't, but replay value is one of the main aspects of in-game and actually the most important, I believe. Anyways, I really want to hear your thoughts about all of this down in the comment section. I know this video is a bit long, but it's a theory craft video, and I like talking about stuff like this, especially when we're on the cusp of a new game. It's in development, it's cooking. We're at the point now where we're just waiting for some type of announcement of what's to come in the Division franchise's future. I know we got a lot going on with them potentially selling, or, you know, them losing a lot of money from whatever's been happening in the past 10 years. But, you know, Division has been going strong for a long time, and I think that honestly that's the game that will save them in the midst of all of this turmoil. Let me know if you agree with me or not. I appreciate you listening to me and conversating with me in this video until the end. As always, I'll see you in the next one, fam. Be right out.